CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Sudan's Rapid Support Forces agreed to another attempt at a ceasefire to begin within hours, but there's no response yet from the army. Our other headline, shipping Ukraine's grain. A ban on moving it through Poland is lifted, but farmers in neighbouring countries complain of falling prices. A voting machine company accepts a multi-million-dollar settlement from Fox News, averting a blockbuster defamation trial. But there's more legal trouble ahead for the US network. And can he go the distance to become world heavyweight champion? China's boxing champ Zhang Jilei tells us he's fighting for the top. Sudan's paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, says it's committed to a 24-hour ceasefire starting from 6 p.m. local time on Wednesday. This follows the failure of an internationally brokered truce between the group and the Sudanese army that was due to come into force on Tuesday. But that halt in fighting broke down within minutes. The army hasn't yet said if it'll abide by this latest ceasefire plan. Airstrikes and explosions have continued to hit the capital, Khartoum. The fighting, now into its fifth day, has left at least 270 people dead and thousands injured. Many people have been trapped in their homes by the violence.
At this point, after speaking to so many people, we all think that it at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who wins, because we've already all lost, because people's houses have been damaged. The infrastructure has been damaged even more now, and we barely even had an infrastructure to begin with, and more people have been killed, and we just feel like whatever is going to come out of it is not what we would hope for this country to have.
Well, our correspondent Naba Moeddine is in Khartoum. Naba, we're hearing about this next ceasefire. What more can you tell us, and why did this first one break down?
Hi, Jamie. Actually, the first ceasefire apparently fell apart, and right now it's falling even before it is started. Right now I can see burnings and explosions near headquarters while I'm talking to you. So it's probably a political or military maneuver that the RSF and the military are trying to convince the international community that they are de-escalating the situation, but on reality there is no de-escalation and the fighting has not stopped. Yes, sometimes it gets calmer than before, but in a minute they renew fighting and people are still panicked and they can't move freely. So there is no ceasefire and the news are conflicting.
270 people dead and thousands more injured, we understand. The Health Ministry warning that the public health services are on the verge of what they call total collapse.
Yes, actually, the health system is already overwhelmed and it was hit by COVID-19. So most of the hospitals cannot operate enough. And now with this crisis and with the fighting that we are witnessing for almost 1 week, there is more than 36 hospitals are out of service, and it's very difficult to provide even the essentials for wounded people, for patients, and even the bodies cannot be buried or put into the morgues. So yes, the health system is deteriorating, and there is bigger health issues loom as the dead bodies and the wounded people are still in the streets without even having a chance to be evacuated.
Naba, thank you for that. Our correspondent Naba Moeddine in Khartoum. Well, let's talk now to Colin Clark, Director of Policy and Research at Soufan Group, a global intelligence and security consultancy. Colin, welcome. We're hearing the ceasefire obviously failed to hold, another one attempted. You call it. What's in store for Sudan over these coming days and weeks?
Well, I think you're right. It is going to be days, weeks, and potentially months. I've long had the opportunity to do academic research on insurgencies and civil wars. And one of the main findings is that the more parties you have involved, especially external parties, the longer these conflicts tend to drag on. And so you've got, a number of countries meddling in this conflict almost in a predatory fashion, like a vulture would prey on a carcass, picking apart the state, and the loser will ultimately be the Sudanese people.
While these two generals slug it out, what's happening to Sudan's day-to-day life in terms of its economy and its infrastructure?
Well, it's coming to a standstill. What you're seeing now is people trapped in their homes, bodies in the street, true state failure, I think, on display for everyone to see. And that's going to, in the eyes of some regional neighbors, open up some opportunities. They're sensing this as a vulnerability, but again, it's going to lead to prolonged bloodshed over the next kind of at least several weeks.
In a world that's perhaps been understandably obsessed with COVID, Ukraine, economic recession, Sudan hasn't been on the lips of many. Give us the backdrop, the context to this conflict.
Well, I think, Sudan is emblematic of what we're seeing now. We have a saying in the United States that all politics is local. I say that the corollary to that is all conflict is global. And that's especially the case now that we're in this era of great power competition. Every conflict, no matter where it takes place, whether it's sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, it doesn't matter, is now viewed through this lens of great power competition where everybody starts taking their sides. A lot of people, warn against making the analogy of a new Cold War, but I think that's exactly where we're headed, between the U.S. on one side, China on the other, and allies and adversaries kind of falling into place.
Why is Sudan so significant? Why is this so important? Why is Sudan so important as far as the region is concerned?
Yeah, well, it's a massive country. It's got a lot of resources, including gold. It's got critical, military, resources as well, including areas where the Russians and others are kind of battling over. And so it's a major linchpin within that part of Africa, and it impacts its neighbors.
What about the involvement of organizations like the United Nations? How helpful or otherwise is that?
I don't want to bash the UN, but, it's going to be largely ineffective. This is going to fall to the generals that are currently enmeshed in the conflict and those that support them. So I hope the UN can step in and do a good job in bringing an end to the fighting, but I wouldn't necessarily bank on it. I think a lot of the power brokers here are going to be in places like Moscow, Washington, Beijing, and elsewhere, not necessarily in the halls of the United Nations.
Colin, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Colin Clark, Director of Policy and Research at Soufan Group. A ban on the transit of Ukrainian grain through Poland has been lifted, but Warsaw says no Ukrainian agricultural products will be allowed to remain in the country. Poland, Hungary, Slovakia and Bulgaria all introduced temporary bans on Ukrainian products following complaints by farmers who say an influx of Ukrainian grain has created unfair trading conditions. This comes as ship inspections of Ukrainian grain resume under a United Nations brokered deal following a 2-day suspension. Well, our correspondent Shelby Wilder is in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Shelby, imports bans in 4 European countries and this 2-day stoppage of ship inspections at Black Sea ports. Just how damaging has this all been for Ukraine?
Well, it has certainly required a lot of diplomatic effort coming from Ukraine. As you mentioned, the hiatus, the 2-day hiatus on Ukrainian ships leaving Black Sea ports has now resumed. That disruption originally occurred because Russia accused Ukraine of bribery and corruption with participating ships, and they stopped inspections from being carried out in Turkish waters. Meanwhile, Ukraine blamed Russia for halting the UN brokered agreement, and that deal is set to expire on May 18th. It's vital that that arrangement is extended because it is used to address the global food crisis, because Ukrainian grain has been shipped from Black Sea ports to vulnerable populations across the world. We do know that Russia's foreign minister will meet with the UN Secretary General in New York next week to discuss this matter. And at this very moment, Ukraine's deputy prime minister is in Turkey having talks over this agreement as well. But this is separate, we should know, and as you had mentioned, from what is currently happening in the EU, where numerous EU nations had called for a ban on the import of Ukrainian agricultural products and grain. This began last weekend when Poland initiated this ban, and then Hungary and Slovakia followed suit. And as of today, Bulgaria also joined on board. These nations were saying that they are trying to protect their local agricultural sectors, but specifically their farmers who had been protesting following a surplus of Ukrainian grain and agricultural products in their countries. And as you mentioned, as of today, we have learned that now the transit of Ukrainian grain has been allowed through Poland. It cannot stay in Poland, but it is allowed to be transported through that country. But this has only come after 2 days of talks this week between Polish and Ukrainian officials to sort of restart this agreement.
A Russian assault in the Black Sea city port of Odessa overnight. What more do we know?
Yes, well, overnight, Russia carried out attack on the southern city of Odessa, as you mentioned, and they used kamikaze drones to hit a storage facility which burst into flames. The Ukrainian Air Force claims they had shot down 10 out of 12 of these Iranian-made Shahed drones. But really, it all just adds to the fact that Russia has been stepping up their attacks in this country, specifically in the east of Ukraine. And today we heard Ukrainian military officials say that just within the last 24 hours alone, there have been 4 missiles and 60 airstrikes launched by Russia along the front lines in Ukraine. And Russia has been redirecting its resources, in particular to the besieged city of Bakhmut, as they are trying to capture that city from Ukrainian forces.
Shelby, thank you for that. Our correspondent Shelby Wilder in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv.
Thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, robots on the rise and taking over the world's leading trade fair in Hanover. We're there next.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Sudan's ceasefire breaks down after just a few minutes as intense fighting traps civilians in the capital, Khartoum. Our other headlines, shipping Ukraine's grain. A ban on moving it through Poland is lifted, but farmers in neighbouring countries complain of falling prices. Fox News has settled a defamation lawsuit brought by the voting machine company Dominion, who accused the broadcaster of airing false claims about the 2020 US presidential election. In an 11th-hour settlement before the trial started, the network agreed to pay out almost $800 million, about half the amount initially sought by Dominion.
Today represents a ringing endorsement for truth and for democracy. Over 2 years ago, a torrent of lies swept Dominion and election officials across America into an alternative universe of conspiracy theories, causing grievous harm to Dominion and the country.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. John, you were right when we talked about this yesterday. They settled.
Yep. Yep. I know, there was a growing sense that they would, which is why when I was on air with you yesterday, I said, blah, 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 if they don't settle. And we thought that they might. And what happened yesterday was that the jury was seated in the morning. Opening arguments were due to begin at 17:30 GMT, about an hour after the last London programme yesterday, and the opening arguments never happened. On TV screens, there were signs up saying unexpected delay, and 2 hours later, the judge came out and said both sides have settled. And why wouldn't they? Because we would have had the TV trial of the century. Rupert Murdoch, head of the Fox Corporation, and some of the biggest names in American television would have been forced to testify, most likely. Now, you don't know these names around the world, but here, these people are huge stars in cable news terms. Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Maria Bartiromo. And the company basically blamed Dominion in the aftermath of the 2020 election for rigging parts of that election and denying Donald Trump a victory. They did that by having on guests who went unchallenged. You know, when you have a guest on a television program, if you're a journalist, you're supposed to push back at their point of view, give them a hard time if necessary. Fox didn't do any of that, and some of the presenters made pretty defamatory comments about Dominion. So they sued. After it was all over, Dominion lawyers came out and said Fox admitted to lying. Fox lawyers came out and said this shows our commitment to journalistic integrity. There will be no on-air apology, and Fox is not covering the story today, so its audience don't really know, if they don't look elsewhere, what has been going on. But you have to understand something about American cable news. It is not news of the kind that we're doing now in this program on CGTN, or which the BBC has been doing around the world for many years. It's not the same thing. It is information entertainment designed to make money. And when you realize that about cable news in America, you understand why this might have happened.
So, well, talk us through what happens next then. Is that the end of the story?
Well, there's no show trial, and I think that rivals like CNN and MSNBC are pretty aggrieved about that. I think the man on CNN yesterday was visibly upset and cross that there will be no trial. In the end, though, Jamie, I think Fox have probably done the whole of the cable news industry in America a favour by settling, because had they not, the bar for being guilty of defamation or libel is so high in America because of the First Amendment. It's certain that they would have appealed. It's almost certain it would have gone all the way to the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., and they would have had to review a ruling they made in the 1960s, which allows this sort of thing to go on based on the First Amendment. So it would have opened a can of worms. And as I've just said, all of these companies are guilty of this. Okay, Fox has been caught red-handed. They've probably the worst offender because of this case. But all of these companies spin their news to suit what they think their audience wants to hear. And there is a second case against the Fox Corporation now. This one is a company called Smartmatic, based in Florida. They provide voting machines all over the world, but here at home in America as well. We're in the early stages of discovery at the moment. There's no date for this trial. And I think you have to believe that as they settled the first one, they'll probably end up settling the second one as well. Jamie?
John, thank you for that. Our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. Chinese robots are attracting attention at one of the world's largest industrial trade fairs taking place in Germany. Our correspondent, Peter Oliver, is there. Peter, a big presence from China there this year.
Yeah, huge presence from China, huge presence from all over the world. In fact, just over my left shoulder, you can see a Norwegian company that provides robotic wheels, but it's the Chinese robots that have really caught some attention, what we've been looking at on Wednesday, particularly when you look at the economic figures that came out from China, showing the growth being higher than we'd expected for the first quarter. That industrial production had been up. And when I spoke to manufacturers of these robots, they said, yeah, we can't build them quick enough to sell them here in Europe.
Robotics company Unitree were an early industry leader in the manufacture of so-called robo-dogs. They've seen a steady increase in orders of their products over the last few months since China's reopening following the COVID pandemic.
Well, the guys here at Unitree have given me a bit of an up-close and personal experience with one of their larger models here. Quite obedient as well. Go around. Now, as he's doing that, this is one of those robots that would be used to go places where humans simply can't go, where it's just not safe for them to go. Can also be used on security detail and can follow commands as well. Down, boy. It's even more obedient than my dog at home.
When used for security, the robo-dog can remain on patrol, returning to a charging station when needed. And if someone does trespass on your property, it can provide photo and video footage of the trespasser. Unitree sales staff put the surge in sales abroad down to a number of factors.
Firstly, because we think Chinese have a huge ability for get the resource, whatever hardware, whatever human resource. So that's one of the reasons. And the second reason that we think the cost from China will be more economical than other places. And the third, we think maybe our technical and our hard working make the markets and make the people know more about us.
Also seeing a rise in European robotics sales is Shenzhen-based company Hans Robots. They specialize in robots and cobots. That's a robot that can work safely alongside a human for use in industrial environments that require grabbing, welding and other repetitive tasks.
This year the business is growing up, especially for the cobot business. Yeah, and we have many partners out of China this year. We are developing more and more new partners, and can see that the cobot industry is going up this year.
One of Hans Robots' EU-based customers explained why they first went to China for their machines.
At the beginning, we select from another robot producers due to the very competitive price, but now we see that the quality is okay, no any damage, no any problems with quality, so we are planning to extend our activity. We started from one robot, now we have in our factory 10, and we are planning to buy more.
All smiles in the cyborg business, mirroring the upbeat mood of China's economy, which saw a raft of positive data out this week.
Lot of very happy people on those robot stands, those stands selling robots here in Hanover. It seems they are doing a booming business in selling those models here in Europe.
Peter, thank you for that. Our correspondent, Peter Oliver. 12 people have been detained after a fire in a Beijing hospital which killed 29 people. The fire broke out in a wing housing critically ill patients on Tuesday. Some people escaped through windows by climbing down bed sheets tied together. The hospital director and the construction company chief are among those detained. Officials say they believe sparks from welding work being carried out in the hospital may have caused the blaze. 11 Indonesian fishermen have been rescued from a remote island off the Australian coast after 6 days without food or water. 9 other fishermen are feared dead. They were stranded on the island after their boats were hit by a powerful tropical cyclone. The survivors were spotted by the Australian Border Force and have been taken to hospital. UK inflation remained in double digits in March, making it likely that the Bank of England will raise interest rates again. The cost of living had been expected to fall to 9.8%. The higher rate was caused by a sharp increase in food prices, with the cost of staples such as cheese, bread and oats soaring. India is on course to overtake China as the world's most populous country by the middle of this year. According to the United Nations, India's population is expected to be 1.428 billion, almost 3 million more than China. Population growth has slowed in both countries, with China's falling last year for the first time in 6 decades. The Chinese boxer Zhang Jilei says he's planning to compete against heavyweight world champion Osksander Usyk after defeating Britain's Joe Joyce on Saturday. In an exclusive interview with CGTN, Zhang says he's also open to a possible rematch with Joyce.
I'm glad to accept the fight, whenever and wherever. It would be better if it's in China, as the Chinese boxing fans can have a closer look of the event.
If a match does happen in China, where would you like it to take place?
I would like to choose Beijing Bird's Nest. It's the place where 2 Olympics were held. I wish I could have a fight there.
You now have the opportunity to challenge Ukraine's heavyweight world champion, Alexander Usyk. Tell us about your plans.
I'm aiming for the World Heavyweight Boxing Championship. My team will negotiate with Usyk's team next to settle the time and place to have the fight. I hope it can take place in August or September. I'm very confident of winning. Now I'm only 1 step away from this goal, so I will work harder to train. I hope I can defeat Alexander Usyk to become the boxing champion in Chinese or even Asian history. I'd also like to challenge the strong fighters like Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. Only by defeating the stronger can I become stronger.
CGTN Europe has picked up 3 awards at the New York Television and Film Awards, winning bronze for social justice reporting. Our documentary, The Secret Betrayal, an investigation into the UK's deportation of Chinese seamen, despite them having served with Britain's merchant navy in the Second World War. Taking a silver medal for environmental reporting, Razor, CGTN's science and technology show, which looked at the importance of tiny organisms in the human body. And CGTN's promo, featuring bulls and bears, took a silver medal for animated program promotion. The headlines again: Sudan ceasefire breaks down after just a few minutes as intense fighting traps civilians in the capital Khartoum. Our other headlines: shipping Ukraine's grain, a ban on moving it through Poland is lifted, but farmers in neighbouring countries complain of falling prices. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to the weather forecast. I'm Tierney. Well, over to Europe. Clear skies are likely to take the dominance here for many portions of Europe, especially for the northern portion from Thursday into Friday, with scattered precipitation as well. And notice that some spring snow is likely to affect the areas around the Alps over the next few days. So please take necessary precautions to stay safe. In terms of the temperatures development over the next couple of days, we can notice that a large portion from the north all the way down through into the Balkans are likely to experience some warmer temperatures in the next couple of days. However, for the majority of the eastern portion of Europe are likely to experience some cooler temperatures as we go through the rest of the week, so please dress up accordingly. About business and travel for the major cities here up in the north, plenty of sunshine is in store here for the city of Stockholm this Friday, but notice that the temperatures difference between the highs and lows will be as large as 19 degrees Celsius, so please be well prepared for this big temperatures difference and do wear an extra layer during the morning and evening hours to stay warm. And here for other major cities across the western portion of Europe, Paris will see some overcast conditions with a high of 16 degrees Celsius on Friday, and showers for Madrid with high in the upper 20s, and the overnight low temperatures will be in the teens. And that is all from me. Stay tuned for more City Forecast.